All right, we're back again with another truck cab. Obviously, as the title states, we're doing another cab coupe, just like that piece of crap right there. This one here came off of a Ranger, actually a 2003, thought it was a 2000, but whatever. 2003 Ranger, short wheelbase truck. We're going to be using that frame for Truckstang 3 in the future. But in the meantime, this cab is going to become another cab coupe. And more specifically, a brooder box cab coupe, because this one will be used for raising up baby chickens to the size of these schmucks over here. So it'll be completely contained, no way in or out for any adult birds. The engine bay area will be turned into an extension of the overall brooder box area, while this area here will probably be kind of like the finishing off area where there'll be roosting posts for the adolescent birds and all. I did take some time to strip this thing down earlier off camera because this thing still had the dash in it and a whole lot of other crap inside the engine bay. But I even had to hack some holes in the floor around where the body mounts were because those bolts were not coming off, even with the impact wrench. But it's all good. I got to weld patches in here anyway in order to plug everything up. I do have one door for this thing, passenger door. I will have to source the driver's side door because, again, like I say, I want to close this thing up. And rather than be extra tacky by putting sheet metal over this, I figure I'll just put another door on here so it'll look better. But in the meantime, I got this thing set down on our foundation made with 4 foot long 2x8 boards on the concrete blocks, as we could see right there. But I still have to secure the cab to the blocks, well, not the blocks, to the lumber, so this thing won't move around or shift around. Then we can actually get into the metal working, which is basically welding a bunch of crap in here. So go ahead and get started with that. I'll get back to you shortly. Stand by. All right, we got our cab mounted down just like on the Toyota cab. 4 mounting points. Got a deck screws here, over there, there, and there, as you can see from the fender washers. 4 points in the lumber, so our cab is secured. Also took a second to put the doors back on so we could get that out of the way. Now the next thing is going to be to start patching all these holes here. There are some holes that were cut when we tried to remove the cab earlier that we have to patch up, as well as the holes over the shifter hole, holes in the firewall, and just little bitty holes here and there. I will have to eventually cut a hole in the firewall to make the doorway going into the engine bay. That'll be an extension of the overall brooder box. But our biggest thing is going to be to cover up all the different holes on here, so when we put our baby chickens in here, they don't end up falling through anything. That even includes the holes on the door panel on the passenger door. I did decide to leave the panel on the driver's door for that exact reason. Could have just left the panel on the passenger door, but the clips and everything were all busted up and all, which, I mean, that's neither here or there. I could just drove screws through the thing to hold it on, but yeah, whatever. We might visit that in a second, so stay tuned. But we're gonna go ahead and finish our holes up so we can get to the greater welding, which will be in the engine bay. As for our engine bay area, we're gonna have to create a foundation of sorts using conduits welded all together between the firewall and the core support and between the fenders, so I can create a solid enough platform with which to attach large panels of sheet metal, so I can enclose the entire area from the firewall all the way to the core support. I'll also have to add metal over the holes where the headlights went and where the radiator went as well, and close all of that area. All right, we have our engine bay floor area done. I had some corrugated roofing metal left over. Pieces were too small to use on any kind of roofing application, so this was pretty much a good enough use for them. As we could see, it's pretty tacky looking because rather than try to weld any kind of sheet metal in and go through a whole bunch of welding wire, I rather secure everything with self-tapping screws, because at some point in the future, a lot of this metal will rust and need replacement, and it'll be a lot easier to replace if all I got to do is just remove some self-tapping screws and cut a new piece and zap them back in there again with the self-tapping screws. But as a result, with all the gaps and cracks and crevices present, I will have to fill all that in with some spray foam, so no big deal. But I do still have to do our core support panel that I want to have, so it'll make cleaning this thing out a little bit easier. That'll just be a relatively large piece of sheet metal. With the core support area covered up, I could then put our hood back on to complete the engine bay brooder box extension area. Now, with the brooder box floors, the engine bay area, all that stuff done, we can now move on to our electrical system, which is going to be relatively simple. Just a couple junction boxes. One's going to have the switch and outlet combined, with the cord going out to reach an outlet that it'll be plugged up to, and that outlet will be supplying a wall heater, like a little bitty 350 watt heater, and it'll be supplying a hanging lamp that'll have a infrared bulb for use in brooder boxes. And from there, I'll have some Romex cable snaking around, going over to the engine bay to another junction box that'll just have a regular light socket. That too will have one of those heat lamp bulbs inside of it. From there, with our electrical system pretty much done, we could then start looking at our water system, which is pretty much going to be made up of remnants of all the watering apparatus that was removed from the old Mustang chicken coop. So that'll just be a little PVC manifold with some drinker cups on there, and the reservoir, bucket reservoir, set up right behind the cab, same way as we did with the Toyota Cab Coop. So it'll be a duplication of that. All right, we're pretty much done with our cab coupe, save for a couple little things. Take a quick walk around. As you can see on the inside, we have our watering apparatus, which is just 3 drinker cups, simple manifold, with a line going out through the back of the cab and coming out where it goes into the bottom of this bucket here. Simple reservoir setup like on the other coupes, and that float valve is connected to a higher pressure line, which is actually regulated from the high pressure of the garden hose line and all that. We don't have a garden hose on here yet, but the regulator will drop it down to 25 psi to feed into the float valve. Of course, the float valve will fill up the bucket, and then it'll gravity feed out into the drinker cups. I had to do a quick on-the-fly construction of a tripod style platform using 4x4s and some pallet boards in order to hold up the bucket reservoir, so I could be able to get this whole monstrosity set up. And a pipe right here is held in place with 2 conduit straps. There's also a self-tapping screw at the very top of the bucket, holding the bucket against the back of the cab. While we're back here, I could also point out our corrugated sheet metal panel covering our rear window, since there's no rear window. And because it's corrugated sheet metal, I'm going to have to come around these edges with caulk to seal all this up so it doesn't end up allowing rain to flood the back of the cab. Back to the inside of the cab, we could also see we have our 2 roosting posts in place made out of conduit, with the one post right here supporting our heat lamp that has its power cord wrapped around that pipe, and it's going over to our outlet box right here. And there's also a switch on that outlet box that feeds this wire right here that runs up through the C pillar and around to the A pillar here, back down, and it goes through here and then goes through that little opening right there in the firewall, comes out through the firewall and into this outlet box, well, not outlet box, junction box with a light socket on there feeding this other heat lamp. So obviously this could be turned on and off at independent of the other lamp. And obviously when the baby birds get big enough that they're able to actually jump on the roosting posts, they could float over into the engine bay area and take advantage of that heat lamp. But when there's a whole bunch of baby birds that are the size of a chicken nugget, they'll probably be able to utilize that heat lamp right there just fine. Now, have to do a detour to show what I'm going to do when it comes to our heater setup. In our Toyota Cab Coop, our heater setup is nothing more than a sheet metal panel folded up and held in place by self-tapping screws with a small 350 watt heater zip tied to that panel and plugged up to the outlet. This same setup will be used in the Ranger Cab Coop, so in addition to the heat lamp, we'll have a redundancy when it comes to keeping the cab area nice and toasty. Obviously when the birds get bigger, they're not going to be all congregating under that low-lying heat lamp right there. So that's where our regular wall heater will come in play to blow heat around the higher areas here, so when they roost on these posts right here, they'll be able to catch all that heat, as well as the heat generated from this lamp right here in the engine bay area. Now, of course, like I said before, I'm going to have to come around all this with spray foam to seal all this garbage so we can keep the drafts out and everything. Last thing to point out is our access panel right here or more of a clean out panel. This was done by putting 4 7/16 bolts through 4 corners, holding those bolts in place on the core support with nuts, and then drilling holes in that piece of corrugated sheet metal, putting that sheet metal over the studs from the bolts, and then holding the panel in with another set of 4 nuts. Right now they're just hex nuts, but I could put wing nuts on there to make it easier to take the whole thing off, which is obviously nothing more than taking the nuts off, knocking the panel out, and it'll open up the front area for cleaning out everything in the engine bay area. So it's a simple setup. So yeah, all in all, this thing's pretty much done, save for the heater and the caulking and stuff. So yep, gonna leave it at that. So till the next time, as usual, like, subscribe, notifications, TikTok, website, all that good stuff, and stay tuned for more.